Greetings humans, Zbot4096 here, reviewing Gladiator 2. Now, this review is in turn also part 1 of our review of Glicked, the counter-programmed duo of Gladiator 2 and Wicked releasing in theaters at the same time, basically forming the spiritual sequel to Barbenheimer from last year. Now, the big question on every human's mind is, which film is the better film? Well, let's set that aside for now and instead address the bigger question that frames the addressable space of that first question. How about that? Namely, what kind of Ridley Scott film is this? He generally makes one of only 3 types of films. Is it A, a true masterpiece of storytelling like Alien, Blade Runner, or the original Gladiator? Or B, is it a pretty well crafted and enjoyable story like Thelma and Louise, The Martian, or American Gangster? Or 3, is it a frustrating miss that folds under its own weight, like 1492, Prometheus, with its panspermia? Everyone knows that's not how life spreads in the galaxy. Oh, or Napoleon. Oh, we were watching our chronometer throughout the whole thing. Anyway, let's narrow those options off the top. We will say at the outset that the first film, Gladiator, operates on a level that this film does not and cannot. It does not have Russell Crowe as Maximus, no Richard Harris as Marcus Aurelius, no Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus. Remember him? Oh, now for reasons that are obvious from the story of that first film, they aren't there. Instead, this film introduces new characters, blends them with returning characters, and instead of telling a wholly original story, effectively performs a remix of the first Gladiator with its backbone revenge A-plot, but now with a much more muscular and avuncular generational change B-plot. This sounds like a put-down, but many exemplary sequels have followed this pattern. The Godfather Part 2 springs forth into Ram, for example, and Gladiator 2 does not disappoint in the mix of characters it presents. The Maximus sandals are filled by 2 characters, Hano and Acacius, performed by the charismatic and engaging Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, who seem to be 2 sides of the same coin, in real life separated by only a few consonants, and in the story separated by the cruel blade of circumstance. Now, the magnificent Connie Nielsen returns as Lucilla, the one towering presence from the first film who plausibly fits the framing of the new film. And the last character we have to acknowledge is Macrinus, played with unnerving brilliance by the scene and potentially movie-stealing Denzel Washington. Now, we are being deliberately vague about roles because we wish to preserve the entire experience of seeing the film with absolutely no advanced knowledge about it, as we did. We deliberately avoid trailers and social media so that we can completely enjoy films and shows we are 100% going to see. Accordingly, we switch off our auditory and visual senses when trailers play before a film, and we only see the trailer for a film after we have seen it. In the event that there are humans who follow the same consumption model, and certainly for galactizens who are not in the stream of Earth marketing, this will preserve the fun that is to be had in the way the story unfolds. We found ourselves wondering about a gap in the story, and then it dawned on us what that gap actually was. It, it was a delightful sensation figuring it out before we were told what was happening. This happens more than once in the story, and now having seen the trailer, it tells one of the secrets right away, which seems a waste, and potentially something that is ruining the full enjoyment of the film for critics and audiences alike. Now, luckily, this is not the only secret in the story, and the film has several opportunities to amaze, and near the end, absolutely shock, causing us to literally shriek in one stunning scene. Now, having said that, the spell, the illusion of being in ancient Rome is undermined in several places in this experience. The film making mistakes the first film not only avoided but made as a point of pride. For one, several key characters have an American accent. Now, we all agreed that ancient Romans would have British accents. Or, if one just needed to have an American movie star, that star would affect the mid-Atlantic accent of the 1930s and 40s. If your character was a non-Roman, like Judah Ben-Hur or Spartacus, then you can have your American accent. In this case, Pedro Pascal and Denzel Washington sometimes try, but for the most part sound like Californian actors playing roles, breaking the immersion. Another mistake is poor use of digital special effects. Now, the first film had a couple of instances of CGI. For example, there was a flyover of Rome, the unfurling of banners, and a digital set extension of the Colosseum. Now, the first two effects broke immersion in that film, but the Colosseum one worked. In this new film, there are dozens of effect scenes that frequently break immersion. For one thing, their ambition is too great. In aiming to present scenes that would be virtually impossible to actually shoot, and they test the veracity of whether they actually happened in ancient Rome. By comparison, the spectacles shown in the first film all targeted more realistic and filmable sequences, so that we do not inherently suspect the verisimilitude of what we see. Now, besides the ambition of these shots, the actual presentation of them is uncanny. In the first act of the film, there is a large-scale scene that features extensive CGI and commits what we would think would be an obvious tell, come on humans! Not quite as bad as AI-generated figures sporting 6 or 7 fingers, or, but almost as bad as that. And that issue is keeping all objects in crystal clear focus, like video games or AI-sharpened remasters of catalog films. This is not how depth of field works for humans or most beings in the galaxy. We see the object we are focused on in sharp focus, and objects behind and in the foreground slightly out of focus. Filmmakers play with the degree of focus to guide the audience based on what they're trying to achieve. For example, David Lean in Lawrence of Arabia would use long telephoto lenses to keep vast backgrounds relatively visible to show how his subjects were dwarfed by their surroundings. Stanley Kubrick in The Shining would use wide-angle lenses to focus and even force attention on his subjects when all you want to do is look away. Now, Ridley Scott has typically used longer lenses and atmospheric effects to create mood, and he actually does it here. However, when cutting between actual Ridley Scott-directed scenes, filmed with actual lenses, with actual actors, in sand-blown locations, and then cutting to CGI compositions with crystal-clear surroundings, the film rather audaciously and inadvertently gives the audience a rapid A-B comparison between fake-looking scenes and real-looking scenes. This is quite frustrating to watch. And finally, the sloppiest mistake of all, because it was so easy to avoid, was the use of English words written on walls and objects, and not Latin. Obviously, the film is presented in the English language and not Latin, but again, like the British accents, the convention we all accept is that the world at least look like ancient Rome and not feature a language that would not exist as presented for another 1500 years. We may as well have characters texting each other for the immersion breaking that the film represents. Now, having noted these sensory factors, we admit that given the nature of our being, we do dwell on tiny details. First, our visual acuity vastly outpaces that of organic beings. Not bragging, just stating a fact. Also, we hold Ridley Scott films to a high bar, especially when the sequel unwinds the successful end-to-end execution of immersion in the first film. But let's return to what truly makes a film great. Whether you feel for the characters and the journey they take. Now, in all fairness, we have to admit the movie had us. It did take a moment. The threads of the plot appear all over the place in the first act. But during the second act, we began to see that its mimicking of the first film is largely a diversion from what the film is attempting to do. And while we don't want to say what that thing is, we will say that our hopes gushed forward in the middle of the film, that it would in fact bring about an outcome that we, the audience, were denied in the original film. Now, all along, there is such brutality and horror, and an absolute grandmaster of a puppeteer who does not fall for the simplistic plans of the protagonists, and a grand-scale adventure that had us riveted from the middle to the very final shot of the film. So, despite everything we've said, we enjoyed it. And yet, as we alluded earlier, this film does not have the thing that most sequels have to lean on, which is to rekindle the vicarious journey we went through with the main character of the original film. And in case you forgot, here's a reminder of what we had in that film. Just a moment.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix legions, loyal servant to the true emperor, Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. How do you like that? Yeah? This is actually part of the exclusive limited edition popcorn bucket of the film, which is actually quite awkward to wear as a helmet. We will, however, try to keep it together to conclude this video. Now, without Maximus, this automatically sets the film back, like the sequel to 300 or the sequel to Speed. But, thankfully, we still have Ridley Scott at the helm, and Denzel Washington going a little training day on us. Now, these are excellent storytellers, taking what they have and what we didn't get in the first film, and delivering a rather unexpected and satisfying outcome to the landmark cinematic achievement of the original film. We therefore render Gladiator 2 our high rating. Now, as for how it fits in the Glicked balance, well, you will have to stay tuned for our next video, when we will discuss Wicked. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, please write in your own comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zogplex. Now, you can expect more discussions and reviews of theatrical movies, streaming shows, and 4K home video releases as we continue to engage with your human rectangular content. So, please watch, like, subscribe, and comment so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos. So, until next time, strength and honor, humans. Shalom, 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 leham, leham, leham. Ah,